How do you keep a child alive for 5 straight months in a land where the air itself can kill you? At minus 50 degrees Celsius, survival stops being about comfort, courage, or toughness. It becomes mathematics. Every breath steals heat. Every mistake compounds. Water freezes beside the fire. Steel cracks in the cold. Skin can freeze in less than 2 minutes when the wind rises across the open Mongolian steppe. Most modern people experience winter as an inconvenience. The Mongols experienced it as an enemy intelligent enough to exploit weakness. And yet, for centuries, entire families survived there without forests, without permanent cities, without endless stockpiles of fuel. They raised children, herded animals, crossed frozen plains, and built one of the largest empires in human history in conditions that would destroy an unprepared modern person in a single night. The mystery is not that the Mongols endured winter. The mystery is how they created a system so efficient that life could continue where logic suggested life should not exist at all. Because the Mongols did not survive the cold through one invention, they survived through a chain of interconnected solutions so refined that removing a single piece could collapse the entire machine. And at the center of it all stood a circular structure of wood, wool, smoke, and heat that looked simple to outsiders. But the yurt was not a tent. It was a weapon against winter itself. To a traveler seeing one for the first time, a Mongol yurt looked temporary, fragile, primitive. That illusion vanished the moment the blizzard arrived. The circular shape was the first layer of intelligence. Modern buildings trap cold in corners where stagnant air collects and frost begins to spread. The yurt eliminated corners completely. Wind flowed around it, instead of slamming directly into flat walls. Inside, warm air circulated continuously around the central fire, instead of dying in frozen pockets. The structure breathed, like a living organism. Its wooden lattice frame, called the khana, flexed under pressure instead of resisting it. In brutal cold, rigid structures become brittle, but the yurt bent with the storm. Snow, wind, and thermal contraction dispersed across the circular frame like force traveling through the spokes of a wheel. Then came the felt. Layer after layer of compressed sheep wool wrapped the structure in breathable insulation. The trapped air inside the fibers created thermal resistance, almost identical in principle to modern insulated winter clothing. But insulation alone was not enough. The true genius was moisture control. At minus 50 degrees, moisture is deadly. Every breath, every cooking pot, every sleeping body releases vapor into the air. In a sealed shelter, that vapor freezes onto the walls as ice. Eventually, the interior becomes a frozen shell that drains heat faster than the fire can replace it. The felt allowed vapor to escape before it condensed. The yurt stayed dry. And in the ancient steppe, dry meant alive. There was another problem. The Mongolian steppe had almost no trees. A modern person dropped into that environment would quickly discover a terrifying reality. Shelter means nothing without fuel. A perfect structure becomes a freezer the moment the fire goes out. So the Mongols turned to the only energy source the landscape could provide: dung. Dried horse, yak, cattle, and sheep dung, called argol, became the thermal foundation of winter survival. Families collected it constantly throughout summer and autumn, stacking it in protected piles before the first major freeze arrived. To outsiders, burning dung sounds desperate. To the Mongols, it was engineering. Grass absorbed solar energy during the brief warm season. Animals converted that grass into body mass, milk, and waste. The waste dried beneath the steppe sun and became stored fuel for winter. The Mongols were effectively burning captured summer sunlight, months after the grass itself had vanished beneath snow. And unlike wood, argol existed everywhere the herds existed. Well-dried horse dung burned slowly and steadily. It produced enough heat to boil soup, melt snow, and keep a family alive through nights cold enough to freeze exposed flesh solid. The smell was not the unbearable stench many imagine. Properly dried argol burned with a dry, earthy scent that became psychologically tied to warmth and safety. To a Mongol child, the smell of smoke meant survival. But the most dangerous moment came before dawn. Families buried glowing embers beneath ash overnight to keep them alive until morning. If the fire died completely during a blizzard, relighting it in sub-zero wind could take precious time and energy the body could not afford to lose. So the embers were treated almost like living spirits. Because in many ways, they were. Nothing inside the yurt was accidental, not even the direction of the door. The entrance almost always faced south because the deadliest winter winds descended from the north through Siberia. A north-facing opening allowed Arctic gusts to rip heat directly from the shelter every time someone entered or exited. The Mongols understood airflow long before modern thermodynamics gave it a name. A thick felt flap acted like a primitive airlock. Warm air remained trapped while freezing wind stayed outside. The central hearth generated a steady convection current that pulled fresh oxygen inward and expelled smoke upward through the roof opening, called the tuno. The result was astonishingly advanced. The yurt stayed breathable without exposing the family to constant drafts. Even sleeping positions followed thermal logic. Families slept in a radial pattern around the fire with feet facing inward toward warmth and heads outward toward cooler walls. The arrangement minimized heat loss while protecting extremities from frostbite. The yurt was not decoration. It was environmental physics translated into daily life. Winter destroyed agriculture across much of the steppe. No vegetables, no orchards, no stored grain reserves large enough to support entire populations. So Mongol food evolved toward one brutal question. How do you extract the maximum survival value from every calorie? Their answer was borts. Strips of lean meat were hung outside during the dry freezing season until they became naturally freeze-dried by the environment itself. The result weighed almost nothing and lasted for months or even years if protected from moisture. A rider could carry enough borts in a saddlebag to survive for weeks. When added to boiling water or milk, the hardened meat rehydrated into rich protein soup while using very little fuel to prepare. That mattered enormously when every handful of argol represented stored survival energy. Then came fat. Modern diets fear fat. The Mongols depended on it. Animal fat, marrow, clarified butter, and tail fat acted as dense fuel for bodies burning thousands of calories simply to remain warm. Organ meats supplied vitamins missing from muscle tissue alone. Nothing was wasted. Blood became sausage. Bone became broth. Milk became butter, curds, and fermented drinks. This was not cuisine built for pleasure. It was cuisine built to defeat starvation and hypothermia at the same time. There was another threat hiding inside winter: scurvy. Months without fresh vegetation can slowly destroy the human body. Gums bleed, teeth loosen. Weakness spreads through muscles and joints. Entire crews of sailors once died from it during long voyages. The Mongols found protection in fermentation. Arag, fermented mare's milk, became one of the most important survival foods on the steppe. Rich in nutrients, probiotics, and small amounts of vitamin C, it helped offset deficiencies that would otherwise accumulate during endless winters of meat-heavy diets. Its mild alcohol content also mattered psychologically. Imagine spending nearly half the year trapped inside a felt shelter while blizzards erase the world outside. Darkness stretches across the plains. Wind screams through the night for hours without stopping. A warm fermented drink was more than nutrition. It was emotional stability. The Mongols understood something modern survival manuals often ignore. People do not survive on calories alone. They survive on morale. To modern societies, livestock are property. To the Mongols, they were infrastructure. Horses acted as transportation, food reserves, fuel producers, and weather detectors all at once. Mongol horses could dig through deep snow with their hooves to uncover frozen grass beneath, allowing them to survive conditions that killed many imported breeds. In storms, herds were sometimes positioned upwind from the camp. Their bodies formed living barriers against the wind. Dozens of animals clustered together, generated measurable warmth through respiration and body heat. Sheep provided wool for felt insulation. Yaks produced rich, high-fat milk in harsher mountain climates, where ordinary cattle struggled to survive. Even animal behavior became environmental intelligence. Horses turning away from the wind warned of incoming storms. Sheep refusing to graze signaled pressure changes before blizzards arrived. The herd was not separate from human survival. The herd was the system that made survival possible. Many civilizations collapse when climate becomes unstable. The Mongols adapted. Chinese dynasties built walls against northern winters. European armies frequently froze during campaigns. Napoleon lost thousands, retreating through Russian snow centuries later. But the Mongols evolved inside cold itself. Mobility became their greatest advantage. Their homes moved, their fuel moved, their food moved. Their economy walked beside them on 4 legs across the frozen plains. While sedentary societies depended on vulnerable supply chains, the Mongols carried survival with them. This is partly why they shocked the medieval world. Foreign observers often describe them as unstoppable, almost unnatural. But what terrified outsiders was not merely military skill. It was environmental mastery. The Mongols had already solved problems most armies never learned to survive. The greatest danger of extreme winter is not always freezing. Sometimes it is hopelessness. Imagine hearing the same wind every night for months. Imagine waking before dawn to revive embers while darkness presses against the felt walls. Imagine knowing a single sick animal could threaten your family's food, fuel, and shelter all at once. The Mongols endured because survival became culture. Children learned responsibility early. Tasks were shared collectively. Fire tending, fuel gathering, herd protection, food preparation, all became ritualized habits repeated across generations until they felt automatic. There was very little room for panic. The environment punished emotional instability harshly. Discipline was warmth. Routine was safety. Community was insulation against despair. And slowly, over centuries, the Mongols transformed one of the harshest climates on Earth into something survivable, not through domination, but through adaptation. In the end, the greatest misconception about the Mongols is that they conquered nature. They did not. They learned how to fit inside it. The yurt worked because the animals existed. The animals survived because humans managed them. The fire burned because the herds consumed summer grass months earlier. Food preserved life long enough to tend the fire. The shelter protected bodies long enough to protect the herd. Everything depended on everything else. It was not one invention. It was an ecosystem of survival, refined through centuries of failure, memory, and adaptation. And maybe that is the part most worth remembering today. Modern civilization often gives us the illusion that survival comes from technology alone. But the Mongols understood something older and deeper. Survival comes from systems that remain balanced with the world around them. The steppe offered almost nothing. Yet human beings still found a way to live there. Not comfortably, not easily, but brilliantly. And perhaps, somewhere inside the endless winds of the frozen grasslands lies a forgotten truth about humanity itself, that our greatest strength was never control over nature, but the ability to adapt to it together. If you enjoy exploring the forgotten engineering, survival systems, and hidden intelligence of ancient civilizations, subscribe to Shadows of Valhalla. Because history is far stranger, harsher, and far more ingenious than we were ever taught.